Welcome, everybody. I'm Dylan Paul, but most importantly, here today, I am joined by Ken LaVicka. Ken is the broadcaster for the FAU Basketball Owls and also Inter Miami, the MLS team. So, Ken, I'm going to kind of give you the floor to introduce yourself here.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you, Dylan. As you said, Ken LaVicka, I have been in the broadcast industry for 20 years now. I'm a very old man. I've got gray hairs developing. It's a rough scene, but I've been doing this an awful long time. I grew up in the Chicago area. I hate the Cubs. I'm a big White Sox fan, but I was lucky that I grew up in the prime era of Chicago Bulls basketball. So my childhood was encompassed by Michael Jordan's greatness and the dynasty and the 6 championships in 8 years, the back-to-back three-peats. So that had a huge influence on me, and I would sit in front of my Nintendo playing triple play baseball and do play-by-play to it. And I don't know, you might be too young to remember Hawk Harrelson, who was the White Sox TV voice. He's in the Hall of Fame now, but he had all these catchphrases, all these quips, and me and my friends would go play baseball and say the exact same things that Hawk would say on the broadcast. And I sort of consumed myself with that, and when I got to high school, I had a friend who self declared nerd. I'm not calling him a nerd, but he was a self described nerd, and he ended up doing some work with the cable access uh, TV network out of my suburban Chicago hometown. And he asked me if I wanted to call some of the high school basketball games. And I said, sure. So I would sit on a balcony with a stick mic and call my friends' high school games. And from there, I realized that that's the direction I wanted to go, and went to college at Valparaiso University. And right from the jump, started in radio, dabbled a little bit in TV. I wrote as well in the student newspaper. And once I was done with college, I had an extensive broadcast reel. So that was very fortunate from all the work I had done in college. But my first ever job that I took was in newspaper in a small town called Dickinson, North Dakota. I took that job. It was going to be growing up in Chicagoland, going to desolate, rural North Dakota was certainly going to be a lifestyle change. But the day after I returned from North Dakota accepting that job, I got a call from a radio station in Madison, Wisconsin, wanting to talk about a resume I had sent in months and months and months and months and months ago and had completely forgot about. And that was the beginning of my broadcast career, because I eventually got offered that job, which was as a show host, a producer, a summer league baseball play-by-play gig. And I had to tell the newspaper job, sorry, guys, I'm not coming anymore. And that was 2 weeks before I was supposed to start that job. And I was off from there. I covered Wisconsin football and basketball. And after just under a year, I got a call from the ESPN radio station in West Palm Beach. And they asked if I wanted to come down there. And I said, yes, I'm 22, I'm single, and I've never been south of Disney World. That works for me. And so I've been in this area ever since. I'm no longer with the ESPN affiliate, but I've been doing FAU football and basketball for the last 17 years. Obviously, a lot of special moments there. This past year called Inter Miami's run to an MLS championship, and that's where I'm at now. I'm sure I'm missing a lot here and there, but that just gives you a little of a synopsis, the path of my broadcast career.
Yeah, one thing I could definitely agree with you on, besides all the broadcast stuff, is the hatred of the Cubs. I don't know if you could see
Oh,
my sweatshirt. I'm a Cincinnati Reds fan, so
yes.
I can definitely relate to you on not liking the Chicago Cubs for sure.
Man, it's a deep-seated hatred.
For sure.
But
Yeah.
I have some top moments in my sports life. Number one is the White Sox winning the World Series in 2005, and too close behind it is the Bartman game against the Marlins, Game 6 NLCS. So I'm petty, and I don't care. I'm a
Yeah.
petty fan.
That's how baseball has to be sometimes.
Uh-huh.
That's how it is. So you talked a lot about your early experiences. In you say you started in high school and then in
Mhm.
college and coming out of college. Just for all the young broadcasters out there, just like me, who want to be in your spot one day, Um, what can you say about how important those early experiences were in just like getting you ready for the career that you would eventually have?
Yeah, I was fortunate because my high school opportunity came out of nowhere. And I think that in these days there are, man, do I sound old saying that, but in these days I think there are many high schools that are much more prepared and much more aware of how prominent, especially in the age of content creation. There are a lot of high schools and even junior highs that are much more prepared to set students on that path. So let me just take it from that aspect. You've got to just do it. Right. I think sometimes it can be daunting to get in front of a microphone and to start talking and to start describing things or interviewing people. And it's really, and this goes to the beginning of broadcast time, the first time you hear yourself doing a broadcast and listening back, it is rough. Even if you're the greatest broadcaster of all time, you hear yourself, you think you suck, you can't believe how you sound on the recording, playing it back in your ear. You get over all of that stuff. And I think first and foremost, just for those who are trying to at least set a base, trying to see if this is for them, or this is for you, and you're embarking on this journey, just do it. And it doesn't have to just be sports. It can be covering news in your high school. It can be doing the morning updates over the PA system. It can be learning behind the scenes, whether it's production, whether it is if you're doing TV behind the camera. You really should know the entire spectrum because that's not only going to help you, but it's also going to make you significantly more employable if you go that route as well. But do it. Sit down in front of the microphone, ask questions, be demanding, get yourself in a spot. And I'm just looking at this from a high school, but then especially a college level, because once you get to college, you got to do it there. You got to take advantage if it's there. So just do it. Do it and certainly stand up for yourself and get yourself some time in front of the mic. And one more element that I'll bring up, self critique. You want to go, you want other people to hear you, and you want other people to give you feedback. One, you've got to be coachable. But two, you have to have the ability to be honest with yourself because there's no better critic than yourself when it comes to how you improve. You've got to be comfortable with all of those things, or you're not going to be able to get yourself to a point where you feel like you can contribute, you can create content, you can find yourself a job. And confidence is another one. You got to put yourself out there. And don't hold back. This is not something to be timid. So if you're young and you are motivated, just do it. Take coaching and be as confident as you can possibly be.
Yeah, absolutely. At least what I always say. So I broadcasted my games for my high school, and what I always say is that when I started, I was me and one of my friends. We went to the game, we set up a table, and we set up a broadcast. We live streamed it on Instagram, and that's it. So in high school, like you're never going to have an opportunity like that again where you can really
No.
just go and do it if you want to. And that's really an opportunity that I knew that taking advantage of would be very important for me, and I think is very important for a lot of other people.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because you took the initiative and you went and you set up a YouTube broadcast. And I don't know if you asked for prior permission, but you just did it. And that's what I'm talking about. So let me tell you a story. One of my best friends grew up with him, Adam Amin, who's the #2 Major League Baseball TV play-by-play for Fox. He's also the TV voice of the Chicago Bulls. I grew up with him. We're really tight, really close. And he would find ways to get into the United Center in Chicago. He just had connections. He went to Valpo like me as well, and he had connections in the Bulls media relations. They would find him just an open booth in the 400 level, 9,000 feet in the air, removed from the court, and he would do play-by-play into a recorder. He didn't have anywhere that he was broadcasting to, but to get reps and to have something that he could have either potential employers or someone who's critiquing his broadcast listen to. Think about that. He sat with a recorder in his hand for 4 quarters and called the game to absolutely nobody. That is along the same vein. That is hustle. That is doing it, as we put it. So your example from high school and Adam Amin, I think those are even. Those are absolutely even. You did it at the high school level. He's hanging out in an NBA arena talking to nobody but himself. Those are the things you have to do. It's not glamorous. Sometimes it sucks. I can't tell you how many times I sat in the elements calling a high school soccer game or a high school football game. It's either raining on me and I've put a poncho on top of the radio equipment so it doesn't explode, or I'm getting sunburned back of my neck. It's a complete disaster. But those are the grimy things you got to do if you want even a chance of making it.
Yeah, and you talked about a lot of the different roles that you've taken part of in just in the broadcast industry, not just as being a play-by-play broadcaster. And having done so much radio play-by-play, I'm sure you have a lot of experience with setting everything up and getting everything going. Yeah, and here at the University of Florida, in what I'm currently learning,
Mhm.
they really emphasize getting to know every part of the broadcast and not just the play-by-play. You got to know the behind the scenes. You got to know how to produce, how to direct, how to control audio, everything. So how important for you was it to have all of those different skills going into your early career?
That is how I was able to stay employed in commercial radio for 20 years, was that versatility. And I understand the industry's a lot different now than when I got into it. Again, content creation, podcasts. Podcasts right now, I think, are more popular than actual terrestrial commercial radio. But you have to know how to set up equipment at home. You need to know the correct microphone that works for you. You need to understand how to use a mixing board. You need, after the fact, to know how to normalize your audio. All of those things are important. The days of sitting down behind a microphone or getting behind a camera and that's your sole purpose, those died 2 decades ago. Those days have been dead. But this is why in Gainesville, communications there, WRUF, all of that, it's why, one, you made a great college choice, and two, it's why the school continues to put out professional broadcasters, because you have to be versatile. I can't say that word enough. Versatility is the name of the game. You've got to put your voice down like we talked about, but you also need to put your hands on things, on the board, as a producer, as an amateur engineer. I mean, you brought up that I've got to know how to set up the remote equipment. You're damn right. I've done it for my entire time. Make no mistake, FAU might have gone to the Final Four. I have broadcast professional sports, high-end college sports, and I still, to this day, am setting up my own Comrex equipment. I still, to this day, am on my hands and knees plugging in Ethernet cables. I'm adjusting volume. I'm adjusting the bass and the gain on all of these. So you have to put your hands on stuff. In 2026, if you don't know at least the basics, I can't go in and fix a radio transmitter, but I sure as hell can troubleshoot, because I have the confidence to just sort of play around and to realize I'm not going to break radio equipment or broadcast equipment. You've got to know the basics of how to get yourself on the air, how to troubleshoot problems, and how to make sure you sound the best you possibly can without any outside help. You're not always going to have a dedicated engineer right on your hip. So you better know exactly what you need to do to at least get on the air, you're not going to go far, whether it's terrestrial radio, commercial radio, or podcast content creation if you don't have an understanding to the equipment.
Yeah. And I wasn't gonna bring this up until a little later in this interview, but you did mention briefly some stuff about the Ethernet cord and everything like that. So I am gonna go ahead and ask you about this now. So you're broadcasting for FAU. They're making their run to the Final Four. You're in the Elite Eight. You're in Madison Square Garden, probably the most storied venue in the entire country. It's probably the biggest game you've ever called in your life.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm just gonna let you tell the story as you experienced it.
Yeah, when it happened, I had no idea it would turn into the lore that
Yeah.
it has become. It's funny because you Google my name and it is about the first five things that come up. So I'll try and make this as succinct as possible. There is a minute 40 left to go in the Elite Eight at Madison Square Garden, like you laid out. FAU, Kansas State, and actually 41 seconds left to go. I'm sorry. And so uh, Mike Forrest for Florida Atlantic is a South Florida native, is going to the free throw line for what would turn out to be the first of four free throws. He's about to take his first free throw, and this is total luck. I look down at my phone and I see it light up, and it's a text message from the producer back in the studio in West Palm Beach. And the text says, "You're not on the air anymore. You dropped." So the Ethernet connection, it fell away. I looked at my equipment and noticed that there's a little icon on a Comrex, and when it's a connected lock, like a chain link, you're connected, you're good, everything's fine. When it separates, it means you're not connected to the internet anymore. And so I saw that it wasn't connected anymore. So usually the fix is to take the Ethernet cord out and plug it back in. That didn't work. Meanwhile, Mike Forrest, first free throw, good. Florida Atlantic goes up 3 at that point. Then the next course of action is to turn the Comrex off and turn it back on. And typically that is the fail-safe, and that works. Second free throw, good. So as all of this is happening, I'm waiting for the Comrex to come back on. Kansas State rushes down the floor, down by 4, hits a layup. Jerome Tang calls a timeout. I didn't know it at the time because I was freaking out. But that timeout from Jerome Tang, that quick bucket and timeout, probably saved the moment for FAU fans at that point. So the Comrex comes back on. And I plug the Ethernet cord back in, nothing. Still absolutely nothing. And so I'm not full-fledged panic where I'm unsalvageable and inconsolable, but it's getting there. But I'm trying to keep my head. Just what we were talking about. You got to at least keep a clear enough mind. And I'm not saying anybody's going to have an extreme experience like this with the Final Four on the doorstep and you're scrambling at the world's most famous arena, but you got to keep your head a little bit. And FAU inbounds, and Mike Forrest is fouled again. So I'm sort of looking around, surveying my options. Andy Katz is sitting to my right, and he's asking me, "Do you need any help? Do you need anything right now?" And I'm saying no, but I appreciate it, Andy. Thank you. I had someone sitting to my left, and I had a TV producer for the TNT broadcast. Right next to me as well. Brian Anderson was calling the game, also the Milwaukee Brewers play-by-play voice. And he's saying, "Hey, you might want to just see if it's the cord." And that sort of registered with me. You know what? There are multiple rows here on press row. I was sitting right on the floor, but there was a second row behind me. And I said, there's no way, with as long as these internet connections are run down here, these Ethernet runs, that they are coming from the same modem. So I looked behind me. There was a writer from Outkick sitting behind me, and I felt bad that I did this. But his Ethernet cord was sitting there. He had it plugged into his laptop, and I apologized after the fact, but I didn't even ask him. I just plucked it out of his laptop, and I had the cord wasn't long enough to reach my equipment. So the guy sitting to my left, I'm like, "Hey, could you hold the Comrex?" He held it. I plugged it in. Sure enough, the link connects. I was on my cell phone about to call the final 20 seconds from my cell phone, at least to have something, right? So then I start saying into the phone, we've regained our connection here in New York City as Mike Forrest goes to the free throw line. Florida Atlantic up 2 in the Elite Eight. I'm trying to get the producer just to sort of hear me to understand. I don't want to just say, hey, I'm hanging up the phone and let's reconnect and everybody hears me over the radio network. I want to get the producer's attention to subtly let him know, hey, bring up the Comrex spot back in West Palm and let's transition off the phone. And he was great and he understood it. And next thing you know, we go from me talking on the cell phone to the clear signal of a Comrex and 2 free throws for Mike Forrest. I get those calls in, and then the final 8 seconds where Nelly Davis ends up stealing the ball at half court. FAU goes to the Final Four. It's the most celebrated radio call in FAU history. It's certainly the most memorable call of my career, probably a little bit because of the lore that preceded it, because Andy Katz came in to talk to me. It became a viral moment, and it became one of the storylines, as embarrassing as it is to admit. It became one of the storylines once we went to Houston for the Final Four, because everybody in the broadcast realm that was there wanted to talk to me and ask me about that. And I told Dusty May, I'm like, man, I feel stupid that I've become a little bit of an attention source with this group. And he goes, no, this is amazing. You deserve this. You've been here forever and you're part of our story. And so I appreciated that from him. But yeah, that is the great Ethernet near tragedy at Madison Square Garden. And I'm glad you brought that up, because again, it speaks to, and this is an extreme scenario, and it is very rare when you get that late in an NCAA tournament with the large schools that are usually involved. This was a complete anomaly. You're going to have an engineer with you typically. I've never had that luxury at FAU because it's a smaller production, but those are the types of things you don't know what situation's going to arise, and you don't know what hiccup is going to, it's live, especially if you're doing live radio, live broadcast, even if you're doing live YouTube show, stuff happens. And you just got to overcome it. You can't get too down. You can't pull your hair out. You can't freak out. You just figure it out. And I like to think that I'm at least a little bit of a real life example of, hey, when it seems bad, there typically is always going to be a way to make it happen. Sometimes a little luck, some clear-headedness, a little thought provocation, and you deal with it. But that speaks to the versatility, right? You got to know these things. That's why that word is so important, versatility, and that's what allowed me to figure out what the hell I was doing to work through this issue.
Yeah, I mean, you never know what's gonna happen, whether it's in the
Mm-mm.
borough, whether it's in MSG, man. I mean,
Yep.
it's tough out there, and that's why having that knowledge that you had to in order to fix that situation and just staying calm, and or maybe not exactly calm with the grabbing of the
Yeah,
cord,
but within
but
reason. Yeah.
yeah.
But I'll tell you this, though, too. 2 years prior, Auburn had an issue in the Elite Eight, and they had to give the final call of the Elite Eight on their cell phone. And this is the Auburn team that went to the national
Yeah.
championship game. So and they've got a full-fledged crew that they work with. So it doesn't matter if it's MSG, it doesn't matter if it's FAU and you're a one-man band, doesn't matter if you're top-notch, best of the best crew Auburn. Stuff happens, and you've just got to deal with it. It's much like athletes. On to the next. And I think that applies to broadcasting too.
Yeah, absolutely. And as for that call, at least maybe I'm a little biased, but I feel like your call is one of the most famous calls from that entire tournament, let
Yeah.
alone
Thank
that
you.
game, let alone the Elite Eight. But I mean, Houston, you have a problem. FAU's on the way.
Yeah, I
I mean that,
appreciate that. Thank
yeah,
you.
of course. That was a special run by Florida Atlantic and what they were able to do with that team in that tournament and with some of those players on that team that went on to do even better things than they did at Florida Atlantic. It really shows. And then of course Dusty May, who's now the
Yep.
coach of arguably the best team in the entire country. But I do want to shift gears a little bit back to
Mm,
the broadcast element. Just in terms of general play-by-play, general broadcast stuff, what specific skills do you think were the most important for you to sort of develop early on in your career that led you to where you are today?
I mean, you've heard me, Dylan, from a play-by-play standpoint, and I think you would agree that first and foremost, I'm trying to connect to the listener.
Hmm.
They are coming to me to tell them a story. If I am putting them to sleep, I'm defeating the entire purpose of providing the play by play broadcast to them because I'm trying to give them a visual. I'm trying to spin a real life tale, and I need to engage them and keep their interest. So, first and foremost, one thing I learned with play by play, and my first play by play work at Valpo in college was doing women's volleyball. I played volleyball in high school. I didn't start with basketball. I didn't start with football. I didn't start with any of that. I started with volleyball. And you know what? You got to be well rounded with your sports knowledge. I've never really paid attention to rugby, but if a network called me tomorrow and said, "Hey Ken, we need you to do this sevens tournament in rugby," you know what I'm doing? I'm digging the hell into research to figure out exactly what I need to know and how to call rugby. That's the thing about it. You need to take pride in what you're doing, and you need to be willing to put yourself maybe in a little bit of an uncomfortable zone of bringing it. This is not just sitting on a podcast and hey, Dylan. Yeah, so let's talk about the type of microphone that you maybe want to use in podcasts. No, you've got to really make sure that your energy is there. Another thing too for young broadcasters, and I didn't realize the importance of this until I started doing it and listening back. Directionals are key. You follow the ball first and foremost, and directionals are key. So, for example, with FAU, say this is just random. 8 minutes left, second half. Florida Atlantic Memphis tied at 75. Carlisle up the middle of the floor. It immediately heads to the left wing in the front court left. Throws right wing, caught there by Devin Williams. Williams looking high, low feed, low right block. Caught there, and an up fake, a second up fake, contact off the window. The bucket goes, hits the two, will go for a three. Jalen Parker and Florida Atlantic up two with a chance to take a 3-point lead. 8:15 remaining second half. Something along those lines. Make sure you follow the ball. Make sure you get the directionals. Then you make sure you get the identification. I think that applies a little bit more to football, where sometimes the distance is a little bit longer. So maybe identifying the player right away is a little bit tricky, depending on if there's a player in front of him or his jersey, the back of his jersey's not facing you. But first and foremost, ball. Secondly, directional. Third, identify. Those would be the keys for a young play-by-play broadcaster. And overall, and I hope once people start getting reps, this goes without saying, just bring energy. It doesn't have to be screamy and wild and insane and Gus Johnson, but it has got to be engaging. And you want people to know, one, you're enjoying what you're doing, and two, that you care about keeping them attached to you during the course of the action.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you brought up Gus Johnson and with guys like him because when if anyone listens to one of your calls, the first thing you really think of is energy. I mean, that's
Mm-hmm.
really what you've sort of built your reputation off that crazy energy. Especially, I mean, if you think of that Elite Eight call, that's the first thing you think of just how much high energy and of how much high energy you had in that moment and how it was able to match the moment. I mean, this is a school that's never come even close to the Final Four. Like that, there should be that much energy in that call. I think that makes total sense. But
Yeah, I think there's a couple of philosophies to
yeah,
it. I understand I might not be everybody's cup of tea because I do I and this is all for me organic. This is not a canned me staging my emotion in this spot. And I do think it's a little bit different when you're tied to a school or a team. I
Mhm.
think you probably need to rein it in a little bit when you're doing a national objective broadcast, but there has to be an element of homerism because you're broadcasting to a specific fan base when you're like me, the voice of a school, or you're the voice of the Miami Heat, whether you're E. Reed, whether you're Jason Jackson on the radio side. You have the listener needs to know that you are in it for them, but that also means that doesn't mean that if something bad happens to your team, you just mail it in and you get morose and you get sad and you get depressed. Who are you to deny the listener, even if it's something bad against your team or negative against the team you're calling, to cheapen how big a moment is by and Memphis hits the three, and Florida Atlantic loses at the buzzer. Forget that. That's garbage. That sucks. I've been told before that, hey, maybe it's a little too much, but I'm not going to change. I call the games the way I call the games. Gus Johnson, he gets criticized an awful lot, but he's unflinchingly him. And it's gotten him to the number one college football team on Fox. He was the soccer number one voice of USA soccer prior to the previous World Cup. So listen, every broadcaster has their own thing. Every play-by-play guy has their own thing. But as soon as they start to try and adjust and it becomes inauthentic, that's where you struggle, and that's where you start to lose your loyal audience.
All right, so we've already now talked about some skills that you think are very important technically for young broadcasters. The next thing I want to ask you is what is a mistake that you often see that maybe is like holding young broadcasters back in their work?
So this is going to sound bizarre, but I promise there's a path to weave this in. I think that broadcasters need to know how to write. And I'm going to explain. You are, whether you're doing talk radio, whether you're doing a YouTube show, whether you are creating content, TikTok or Instagram, especially if you're doing play by play, you need to have the ability, stream of consciousness, to express yourself and do so in proper vernacular and a way in which people are going to understand what the hell you're saying. And I think young broadcasters who don't take writing seriously, didn't take it seriously in school, or haven't taken advantage yet in college of doing writing, things are choppy. Things are not complete. Things are a little bit stagnant. If you're going to broadcast and you're going to be talking to people, you need to sound like a functional human who understands how to speak whatever language of person you are speaking to, especially when it comes to vocabulary. And I'm not saying that you need to be a dictionary or a thesaurus, but you need to have a variance of vocabulary in order to sound professional, in order to connect with each level of demographic, age, older people, younger people. It's going to sound dumb if you jump on the air and you say, dribbling the basketball, walks to the 3-point line, takes a shot, miss, rebound. Like, what does that do? That sucks. Right-handed dribble to the top of the key, angles to his right-hand side, deep right perimeter, throws into the post, caught low block along the baseline, retreats to the right corner, turnaround, rainbow jumper. Like, that's the stuff. You cannot have those things just seamlessly pop into your mind, though, and then be able to verbalize them if you haven't written them before. There needs to be an element of creative writing, or at the very least, broadcast script that you are continually working on or spent a lot of time focusing on, or you're not going to maximize yourself. Remember, I told you, Dylan, that I wrote for a newspaper in college. I had never done that before. I got to college and I needed money. I was desperate. I was like eating dinner rolls the first 4 months of the last 4 months of my freshman year as dinner and nothing else. And I'm like, man, I need to find a way to make some cash. And I wrote an email to the editor of the Northwest Indiana Times, and I asked him, hey, I don't have any writing experience, but I know how to write proper sentences. Can I give this a shot for your stringer fee of $75 an article? And he said, sure, come in. I wrote a sample article for him. He tore it apart. I mean, torched it. And you know what? I learned from it. And then my writing got better and my ability to write a lead improved. And then suddenly I was the #1 high school basketball beat reporter in the state of Indiana. That means something and still does in an age where newspapers are dying and dying and dying. And from there, I'm writing features. And when I'm not broadcasting Valpo games, I am writing and covering Valpo games. And I had always liked creative writing in high school. And so all of those things mashed together, I think that has really helped me stay in the broadcast realm, become the level of play-by-play broadcaster I've become. But you've got to train your brain like anything. You're not going to and listen to any ESPN, Fox Sports, any Division I broadcaster. They are going to have a range of word usage where it's just smooth and it weaves together. And you're probably not going to notice it right away, but I promise you now that I told you about it, that's all you're going to be able to pay attention to. And you can even hear me talking to you, Dylan. I try and not use the same words constantly, even in everyday conversation, because I've trained my brain not to do that, because I can't use the same verbiage in play-by-play, or it is going to be redundant and it is going to stand out that, hey, this guy, he's not very original. You need to be original. And you need to stand out and have a personality. And I think having the ability to write helps unlock the ability to speak eloquently and fully describe what you're seeing or conveying what you're trying to give from an opinion perspective. And none of that happens unless you can put pen to paper or finger to keyboard and properly express those things in real, in real structured sentences. And it's why I hate AI. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. And it's not just me being crotchety old man. It's because it doesn't do anybody any good, especially in this industry, if you don't know how to freaking write.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so you've talked about a bunch of these technical skills related to broadcasting. The last thing that I want to focus on is preparation, because I mean, when you hear about broadcasting, that is probably the #1 thing. I mean, the first thing that I remember about broadcasting was in school, just staying after at my desk and watching random high school football games and taking notes and everything to prepare for these games. I mean, it's so important. And for you, what I want to focus on is FAU and Inter Miami seasons overlap. They do.
Yeah. Well,
So
well, and just to add to that, FAU football and Inter Miami and FAU basketball all
that is
overlapped.
also
So
true.
that just adds a little bit of a layer to that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So how I mean, just talking about that overlap and preparing for such different that's three sports at the same time. And just preparing for two different games at the same time is tough. How do you go about your process in preparing for those three different sports?
So I am able to have a little bit of a benefit as opposed to a Bob Wischusen, who he's doing NCAA football, he's doing NCAA basketball, and he's doing the Jets game on Sunday, right? And so The only team of all of the six teams that we have in this hypothetical that he probably doesn't have to do a ton of prep on is the New York Jets. All five other teams, though, he's probably starting from scratch. So for me, fortunately, it was not that extreme for me because, especially at that point of the FAU football season, you're in the final 3 weeks or so of the year. I don't really need to spend much time on FAU football. I'm going to talk with the head coach. I'm going to make sure I know where the injury situations stand. I'm going to understand if there's been any changes to the depth chart, but that allows me to really lock in on the opponent, whether it's Navy or Tulane or whatever. Same thing with FAU basketball. I know the FAU basketball side of things, so then I can really dig in on UCF on the hardwood from an Inter Miami standpoint. I know that team like the back of my hand. And so then I can focus on Nashville or NYCFC the way I approach it, because I haven't been the best in my life at managing time. It's still a flaw of mine, and I'm not proud of it, but I own it. I eat it. I have a deep seated, I think, genetic predisposition to procrastinating. So what I do, though, to fight this off, so let me just give you a hypothetical week here where you have FAU basketball on Tuesday, you have FAU football on Saturday, and you have Inter Miami on Sunday. What I will do is I am going to get the FAU basketball chart organized and on paper on Monday. That way, I can spend Tuesday filling in the chart. And typically, what I'm doing for basketball, I've got at least 3 or 4 pieces of information about each player outside of their numbers and their stats and things along those lines. But that's usually enough to work off of. And then I'll probably have a full notebook page of team information. And I'll do that for both teams, but I can usually just I'll copy and paste FAUs and make some small subtle changes, but I'll have that for both teams. And that way, it's better to be over prepared than under prepared, obviously. And that goes for anything. I would say, Dylan, that I probably use educated guess, any broadcast, about 45 to 50% of what I've actually taken down as notes. But that's fine. One, the listener doesn't know. And two, you don't have to be an encyclopedia. You don't want to fill this broadcast up with so many pieces of information, especially in radio where it's disjointed and the messaging gets lost. But it allows you, by over preparing, to pick and choose depending on the moment what you can use and when it is pertinent. So then that game is Tuesday, and I'm gonna wipe that out. Then that's gone. So then Wednesday, that's when the depth chart comes down across the country in Division I football for every single team, unless they're playing on a Thursday or Friday, and it adjusts accordingly. Monday for Thursday games, Tuesday for Friday games, but FAU, because nobody wanted to really watch them this year, they were all Saturday. They were not standalone on Thursday or Friday. So the depth chart comes out Wednesday, and from there, I'm gonna put together the physical football charts. Thursday after that, I'm really going to dig into game notes, and I'm going to start looking and Googling newspaper articles to see if I'm missing anything about both FAU and the opponent that week. I'm checking Twitter. I'm searching different keywords. I'm looking at maybe any anomalies or trends statistically between games. I'm looking back to last year's meeting between these two teams. I'm going to the all-time record between these two teams. Same thing with basketball. 3 or 4 pieces of information about each of these players, whether it's quarterback, whether it's O-line, whether it's backup nickel. I just want to have it there on my charts, on my 2 deep, so just in case an injury happens or in case a blowout starts to take place and I really need to lean on some of my notes for players I wasn't anticipating we're going to see the field, I can refer onto that. But what I'm also doing, so in this hypothetical Inter Miami is Sunday, I'm taking time to get the physical Inter Miami charts done on that Thursday. That way on Friday, I can make finishing touches to the football fully filled out chart, and I can start filling out the Inter Miami chart because I know Saturday that's all dedicated to FAU football. I'm getting there 3 hours before the kickoff happens, and then I'm probably not leaving the stadium until 6.5 hours later. The last thing I want to do is have to, especially if I'm traveling. There are some hypotheticals where I'm coming back on a charter flight and I'm not going to walk in my door until 4 a.m. and I've got a 1 p.m. Inter Miami game. I need to have a lot of this done. So football's done by the time I go to bed on Saturday. I'll wake up, do the game Saturday, and then if I have to, I'll wake up Sunday morning, put finishing touches on the soccer chart. If it's a night game, even better, buys me a little more time. So, do I wish that I was able to spend more time on all of these? Sure. Everybody wants to feel like they know everything about everything with the game they're calling, but you're not going to know everything about everything. You're just not. You're not going to look at 7 full games leading into this team playing and from your naked eye, oh man, I see that he favors his right hand when he's trying to get to the basket. Bleep that. That's not your job. You're the play-by-play guy. Let the analysts take care of that. Talk with the coaches, get the game notes, make sure you manage your time correctly. And it honestly, while it's tedious, it is not all that difficult. Preparation, proper preparation, enough preparation to do a successful broadcast. You should never have an excuse for why that didn't happen.
Yeah, and I mean, simply said, to any person that's not in this industry watching this, that's a lot of work. Like that is a
Mm-hmm.
lot of time of researching, of commitment to writing this stuff down and just noting everything in your head. And you are a family man yourself. You have 2 daughters, of course.
Uh-huh.
So one thing I want to touch on real quick is just, I mean, of course, work is important, but having a life outside of work in this industry, of course, can be a little tough, but very important. So how have you sort of made it a, how have you made it a priority for yourself to devote time to your family when you're going through these weeks where you have three different sports playing different games?
Yeah. I think some of it is just, for lack of a better term, muscle memory. This is really all my daughters have known, so it's ingrained in them that from August through and it used to be February, but since FAU became a basketball school, it's now extended to March. That it's going to be ragged that I'm around. But and Mike McDonald said this week, the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks, that Thursdays I'll try and get home for a half an hour or so to see my son Jack. Lane Kiffin told me this when he was the head coach at FAU. All these coaches that stay in the office till 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. or sleep at the office, that's fake hustle. They're not doing anything further that's going to help their team win by sleeping at the team facility. And that resonated with me because Lane's right. All those things I laid out, I'm going to get done what I can get done. And what I don't get done, I'm not going to sacrifice sitting in at least watching some TV or hanging out with the girls for a little bit or making sure that I go to dance competition or I pick them up from dance or pick them up from aftercare. I can find 10 more minutes somewhere else to finish up this last meeting portion of my chart, right? So is it tough? Yes. Can I do anything about it when in a couple of weeks I'm going to be in Texas for 6 straight days because FAU basketball plays Rice and plays North Texas and plays UTSA, and we're not coming back home in that time. And we're going to be on buses when we're not flying to Texas and back to Florida. That's just the reality. And that stuff, it's tough, especially on my wife. And ever since I knew her, even before we were married, this has been her reality as well. So they know it. It doesn't make it any easier, but it also puts me in a spot where rightfully I should be finding the time to figure it out. I also don't think, just like not being prepared enough for a broadcast, I don't think there's an excuse for that. There's not an excuse to be able to, within reason, juggle your family life despite all of the travel and despite the games that you're calling. That's what you signed up for. You've sort of dragged your family into it. I mean, that's the best word to describe it. They didn't say, "Hey, you should go get a job where you're gone 80 days out of the year." You've sort of dragged them into this life, so the least you can do is carve a little bit of time to and be present enough of the time where they don't feel like they're being neglected. Every member of the family.
Yeah, really well said, actually. Thank you for talking about that. But I do want to try to wrap things up pretty soon here. But uh before we move into the sort of final questions, I do want to ask you one more specific question
Mhm.
that I of course have to ask is about Messi. I mean, so yeah, I mean you started with Inter Miami in 2024, I believe,
Yep.
and
Yep.
Messi signed in 2023. So you weren't there before him and before he came and signed with the team, but you have been able to come in and see his impact and the impact that he has had on that just organization. So what have you been able to see within the organization from your standpoint from Messi?
Yeah, he really made me, and calling these Inter Miami matches and having the privilege of seeing him still play at this level. Yes, we're experiencing him here, and I'm calling matches for him at the later stages of his career. But this is a guy who is playing as if he could still contribute uh, 20 goals at Barcelona, right? This is a guy who could still give you 80 minutes in the Champions League and beat PSG. Like, that's special. He is playing as well still as anybody in the world. Look at what he did at the FIFA Club World Cup. I mean, that's insane. And he's 38. So I try not to, and it's tough sometimes. And I don't want this to sound arrogant at all or privileged at all. But when you've been doing this as long as I have, and you've seen what I've seen, and you've called some games, the level that I have, the prominence that I have, it's easy to get jaded. And Messi has helped me coming off the Final Four where I was worried, am I ever going to be able to top that? Like, I've got a lot of career left in me. Am I ever going to call something that significant again? Because I don't want to just be chasing that for the next 15, 20 years, right? Messi just calling a random match of his on June 10th in Fort Lauderdale. That's special. That's something that hundreds of millions of people on this planet. He's the most famous athlete on this planet, one of the most famous athletes to ever exist. And there are hundreds of millions of people who will never be able to experience seeing Lionel Messi in person, let alone call his matches. That that's special. And I try to make sure that I experience that gratitude at least occasionally, where say I'm tired or I feel run down, or oh god, Montreal sucks and it's a Tuesday night and this is the opponent for Inter Miami tonight. Like, that's stupid. That's stupid to think that way. He's just so special, and his profile is so magnificent. And I was around the Heat with the big three and LeBron, and that was a circus. D Wade, Chris Bosh. It does not even compare. It's not in the same universe as Lionel Messi when he shows up somewhere. And in South Florida, I think that people are just used to him now. And South Florida can be a place where there's a lot of self-importance. It can be a place where everybody is worried about themselves, how they look, their status. And so Lionel Messi, like when Lane Kiffin was the head coach at FAU, you can sort of maneuver without being mobbed and accosted at all turns and every step. But it's when Inter Miami goes on the road when it really becomes obvious how much he means to people. Um, Showing up to Columbus, where they hate Inter Miami. They hate the fact that Messi is with Inter Miami, thinking MLS is favoring Inter Miami. But guess what? As much garbage as they talk online or on message boards, those fans are 12 deep with this team getting off the bus. And there are people literally weeping at the mere sight of Messi, having a religious experience, just seeing the man in the flesh. I've never seen anything like that before. So that gives you a little bit of an understanding of what Messi is to so many. Like, think about that. You've got Bob Wilson, 44-year-old dad in Columbus, who is melting inside because he has seen his footballing idol Lionel Messi. Take that, magnify it by 35,000 for the young 12-year-old in India watching Lionel Messi and wanting to get a soccer ball and play because he's seen that 10 weaving in and out of defenders, making the impossible happen. And then magnify that by 10 million, what people in Argentina feel like when they see Lionel Messi in the flesh. I don't want to come off as insensitive with this, but he is for some a living God. I'm not trying to be blasphemous, but he is a living deity for so many people. And for God's sake, if I can't appreciate that, and I can't understand how lucky I am to consistently see him and describe him to the masses, I might as well just get out of the industry. So that's been really special. And then this year to be able to call him winning yet another trophy in his career, that MLS Cup championship in Fort Lauderdale, that's right up there with the Final Four. That's special. That's something I'll absolutely always, always, always remember.
Yeah, it truly is incredible. Just the impact that one player can have on
Man,
not only an organization, but the entire country, the entire, not just the league, literally the entire nation. Just
yeah.
wherever he goes, man, people follow, and everybody wants to see him. And the fact that you will be able to say that you have called his games, you've called his goals, you've called him winning a trophy, that is truly a privilege.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely is. That's a good way to put it. That privilege word, I think, is the one singular word that's best to describe all of that.
Yeah, so getting into the last few questions here, Ken. Just a very general question for all the young broadcasters out there that are aspiring to be in a position that you are in today. What is just one piece of advice that you would give to young broadcasters in this modern world of broadcast?
Want it and lay your voice down on something. It doesn't have to be live. It doesn't have to be on YouTube. It doesn't have to be on student radio. It can be in your phone. It can be on an old school newspaper reporter recorder. Just put your voice down on something. Listen, if you're in high school and you're trying to broadcast sports, we just talked about preparation, all of that. Chances are, high school, there's not a damn thing you're really going to be able to find other than talking with your friends about what the team was like in practice yesterday. That's going to allow you to fully prepare. So even if it's you go get the game program before the high school basketball game starts or the high school football game starts, and you literally just have it in front of you and you are looking and you're calling the game, you're noticing the number and you're cross-referencing it in the game program, call the damn game. Get something on tape to refer back to set a base. Same thing whether it's a game or it's a talk component, whether it's radio, whether it is content creation, whether it's over the internet. Just talk, express an opinion, frame a thought. That's all that takes. As soon as you unlock that, then you can start focusing in on the particulars. But absolutely nothing is going to happen. You're not going to get anywhere until you open your mouth and you find a way to be able to listen back to it.
Absolutely. I really love that answer. That's a really good way to put it, Ken. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Of course.
I do have one last question. I'm gonna make this basketball focused just because
Okay.
of the FAU stuff. That's sort of what you're most known for. So the question is that there are 10 seconds left in the national championship game. One team is down by one and they have the ball. So this is your national championship call. Aside from yourself, you can put one play-by-play broadcaster in that seat. Who are you giving the call?
This is going to be this is going to sound weird because he's not typically a basketball broadcaster, but there is no finer TV play-by-play man in 2026 than Sean McDonough. Sean McDonough can call the national championship game in college football, and there are many who think that he should have that number one spot. He's the number one NHL broadcaster with ESPN. And I know that Ian Eagle is the college basketball standard now, and he very rightfully took the baton from Jim Nantz. But right now, Sean McDonough, he is just a step ahead of everybody else. And I would put second in that spot, Kevin Harlan. But give me Sean McDonough all day, every day. I have always looked up to him. And just to tell you how old I am, one of my core memories was 1994 World Series, ninth inning, Blue Jays, Phillies, Joe Carter, walk-off home run to win the World Series. And guess who was on the call for CBS? Sean McDonough. So I've always had a special thing for Sean McDonough, a special respect for Sean McDonough, because even from the earliest recollections of my childhood watching sports television, he has been there to this point where he's the finest in the industry. And that's why I would go with him.
Great answer, Ken. Thank you so much for joining me today. It has been an absolute pleasure talking to you. You do such great work and everything you do, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to have this interview with you. So thank you.
Dylan, it's my pleasure, man. I appreciate you, and anytime, anything you need.
Thank you all so much for tuning into this video here today. It was such an honor and a privilege to interview Ken. He is one of the best in the business, truly just a great broadcaster with such a great work ethic. If you haven't heard him or any of his stuff, I would heavily suggest going and checking it out. He, as he mentioned, broadcasts for Florida Atlantic and also Inter Miami. I'm going to leave some of his information in the bio and his social media where you can find him. And thank you all for tuning in, and I will see you next time.